Yeah, welcome back, viewers, to another edition of Focus on Africans. Today we're in one of the Dutch cities, Wassenaar, which is close to Den Haag. And today we're talking with the ambassador of Uganda to the Netherlands, Ambassador Mirjam Blaak. Let me welcome Ambassador Blaak to Focus on Africans.
Well, thank you very much
for
being on the program.
Yeah, this is a very special occasion for us, and yeah, you are a Dutch citizen representing an African country. Where shall we start from? Tell us something about yourself.
Maybe I should start explaining that I am no longer a Dutch citizen.
Okay.
I have taken up Uganda nationality.
Correct.
When President Museveni appointed me ambassador,
So
I am only Ugandan.
Okay.
And that may be quite confusing with the way I look and all that.
You look good.
Thank you. And yeah, secondly, I am not the Ugandan ambassador to the Netherlands because I'm the deputy head of mission. So in the Netherlands, I'm the minister plenipotentiary, but I'm the ambassador to the international organizations based in The Hague. So which mainly is the International Criminal Court. Yes, I'm an ambassador. Yes, that's correct. We haven't got an embassy yet, unfortunately, in the Netherlands, because that was actually the intention, but you know, African countries and budget constraints. We have not actually managed to.
They don't consider the Netherlands important enough.
Very important, but then there are other priorities, and
so we'll get into that later.
Sure.
Shall we talk about yourself? Tell us something about yourself.
Yes, I was obviously, like you said, born in the Netherlands and born Dutch. So I studied law.
Where were you born?
I was born in Zeist, which is a small village near Utrecht. Yeah, I did my secondary school there. I went to university in Utrecht, and I studied law, and I got my Masters of Laws, and then I moved to Kenya because I was working there.
Immediately after your study, you went to Africa.
Yes, I went to Africa.
Can you tell us why?
Well, I had learned, I had gotten to know Africa already because during my studies I was working as an air hostess with KLM. Royal Dutch Airlines, and as a standby stewardess, so I had travelled many times to Africa. I had already fallen in love with Africa. So
I was going to ask, how did you discover Africa, or how did Africa discover you? KLM, through KLM.
Sure. KLM took me, and yes, the African bug hit me as well. Like they say, Africa grows under your skin, and it did it immediately.
Really?
So yes.
What for you are the attractions of Africa then?
I think the people. I think the people are extremely hospitable. They're very nice. They're often extremely, friendly and open, and they have a sort of attitude in life, which I think in Europeans and Western world has gotten lost a little bit.
And those are attractive to you?
Well, certainly. I think they care a lot about their parents, their family members here, as you know, in Holland. When you get old, you go to a sort of special home, and sometimes people are not visited often by their children because they're all too busy. And I think that still attracts me. But apart from that, it's also the Africa, the pure Africa, the nature, its vastness, its plains, it's beautiful with all the animals, and and the options, the potential, especially a country like Uganda, where you have such fertile land. I think we can be...
Okay, now does that come later? When you go to Africa through KLM, you are staying in big hotels in Kampala. Did you have direct contact with this type of environment you were describing?
Well, I was mostly going to Kenya, and then I've been to Ghana actually on KLM to Accra at that time.
But you didn't fall in love with
of course, with Africa, but it happened to be that, when I got my first job with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees as a protection officer, it happened to be in Kenya. So I was stationed in Kenya, in Nairobi. And of course, Africa as a whole has attracted me, not necessarily one particular country, but then the fact that I was based in Kenya and dealing with refugees is the one that, obviously that's why I stayed.
Well, you train as a lawyer.
Yes.
You had your master's in law.
Yeah, with a specialization in international law.
Okay, then you switched to diplomacy.
Yes, well, surely being a UN diplomat, you have a little bit of a taste to it, although that's for the United Nations, it's different than representing a country and being based somewhere else. It's after my involvement as protection officer with the refugees, I got a lot of involvement, especially with Ugandans. Yes, thousands were there from Uganda. Yes, because they were fleeing away from the Obote regime. President Museveni at that time was a guerrilla leader. He was fighting.
The second coming of Obote.
That was the second coming of Obote. Yes, after Amin's period. You know, Amin was ousted in 1979, and then Obote came back. And the elections did not go very well and honestly. So then President Museveni decided to fight a guerrilla war, and he was the leader at that time of the national resistance movement. Yes, and then, well, Obote was indeed ousted in July '85. And in that period, by that time I was no longer working with the UN because I had worked there for 3 years and I decided to stay in Kenya. And I became a consultant, marketing and legal consultant representing Dutch companies in Kenya and in Sudan and in Tanzania, so I was traveling the region. But the Ugandans had a terribly difficult time in the time that I was with the UN, and people were sometimes being kidnapped and then put across the border in Kenya. So then I had to really take care. Sort of the refugees had my telephone number in their pockets. Like if they were picked up by police, I don't know how many times I had to go to police stations and try and find out whether some Ugandans had been detained. Then they would be, charged with illegal entry or legal stay in Kenya, and I had to, of course, rectify that. So indeed, I had to assist a few refugees.
Was that in your capacity as a
protection officer?
From the UN.
From the UN, yes.
Then later you became a marketing consultant to Dutch.
Yes, that was my own company. I started to set it up.
How did you get involved with the NRM then?
Yes, well, during the period that I was working for the UN, of course, there were already many sympathizers of the movement, and there were other movements, other fractions who were also fighting the Obote government. But I believe that the national resistance movement was the most serious one. And I believed in their principles, and so when Obote, now the second time that he was in power, he was ousted by another military leader called Tito Okello, and that is when Museveni came to Nairobi, and then there were peace talks, which were actually chaired by the former President Moi of Kenya. And that is when I met President Museveni, well, the guerrilla leader at that time, for the first time.
And what capacity were you attending the meetings?
No, he was actually calling on me because I'd assisted his wife to go to, the wife and children go to Sweden. And there were some other Ugandans that I helped also to go to Sweden.
So there were more personal relationships you had with them?
Well, he wanted to thank me for what I had done for the Ugandan people, and because I had been so closely involved with other embassies, he asked me to establish some contacts for the movement. So it's at that time that I started working with those ones who were in the external committee and making contacts with the various embassies, especially the Western embassies, who were very wary of this guerrilla leader. He was supposed to be a Marxist, socialist, and whatever isms you could attribute to him. So that sort of wrong perception had to be broken. And
I was going to ask in what capacity you function.
No, it's just a sympathizer of the movement, and became very closely involved, and became a member of the movement.
You were studying at the diplomatic
level, but in my private capacity. As I said, by that time I was no longer with the UN.
You were not a member of the NRM?
Oh yes, of course, yes, at that time.
You joined them?
Yes, yes.
How did they appreciate you?
Yeah, for sure. I think otherwise, I don't think they would have had the confidence in me representing Uganda here in.
But what attracted you to the NRM?
I think it was their ideas, their objectives were very basic and very genuine. Basic in terms of bringing back human rights and giving people peace and security. This is something that had been lacking, as you know, during the Idi Amin period, and then Obote II, then there were some other, presidents then, so there was no security. and people had no confidence in the future, and they were ruling by the gun. So that is why I think bringing back peace and security and then uniting the country, which was very
divided. You mentioned that there were more guerrilla groups involved.
Yes.
Why did you choose the NRM then?
No, I think they were the most serious one. The others were small, and then they were joining, making some liaison with the others, the alliances, and then they're breaking away again. And really, the NRM had a system going. They were,
disciplined.
Yeah, they were disciplined, extremely disciplined. And of course, the only thing was to build up Uganda and give people back their rights, the civil rights that they had lost for so many years. And I think then building up the country, building an economy, and simple things is something that that most people believed in.
Did you share the Marxist or socialist tendencies?
No, but it was okay. That is what they learned in the bush, and those were some of the books they read. But and then most governments were, as I said, a bit wary. They say, "Oh, Museveni, when he comes into power, he's going to nationalize all companies and state." Making it states.
Was that not a fear you shared?
No, not at all. Well,
why?
Maybe no, because I knew the people.
Because you were representing Dutch companies in East Africa.
Yes.
And now you joined the Marxist organization.
No, they were not Marxist or Leninist. That was the label they were given. Just because their views and being for the people, being for Africa, maybe. And then it appeared later on that all these sort of worries that the Western world had about Museveni starting. Not at all, and that is why I had from the very beginning. I think when people are ignorant and they don't talk to the people and what they want for us Africans and for us Ugandans in particular, then you can't judge them. So just don't listen to what people are saying, but be there, talk to the people, and that is how eventually people. Yeah, the Uganda government managed to gain a lot of confidence.
But how did they gain confidence in you to repose so much confidence in you? What did you do?
I think when in times in need, and that was a very difficult situation where people are being taken from the streets or from their houses in Kenya to be repatriated to a country where they were fearing prosecution. I think that is very serious. I think I know what it is to be a refugee, having closely been linked with them, and it's terrible to be dislodged from everything that is familiar to start living in a neighboring country. And even when you are there, then you think you're being protected. You're not sure what's going to happen.
But were there no times you were afraid for your own life?
No. Well, I guess you're a bit young and unexperienced. I didn't see much danger.
You said people just they disappear from the street. They were picked up by the secret police.
Some of them, yes.
But didn't happen in your case?
No, in my case, yes, I know that I was being quite followed quite closely. I guess I didn't know it at the time, but of course they were quite anxious to see what this woman was doing, and. So that's true. That is absolutely
true. For many people, Uganda is always associated with brutality, violence, starting from Idi Amin, Obote, and can you share with us some of the dynamics of that is responsible for those turbulent times?
Yeah. Well, I think mostly it's the bad leadership that we've had, which caused people to act differently. I think Ugandans are as peaceful, peace-loving people as any other Africans. I don't think that they are, more inclined to war than others. Not at all. In fact, we have had now a peaceful Uganda, as you know, for over 25 years. So it shows that it's not necessary to have a war as long as you have good leadership and people's rights are being protected. But in the past, when you're going through a roadblock, which is manned by soldiers, robbing you of everything until you're just in your underwear, and if you're lucky, you were not taken to a police station or what, so that your relatives had to bribe you out. This was a kind of government that had been there for a few decades. So I think when people were so relieved in 1986 when NRM came into power, that this clean government, even though it was fantastic.
Okay. Were you there during the Obote and
No.
You never visited Uganda?
No, I wasn't there.
Oh, okay. No. So I'm thinking of asking how do you compare the situation now to what existed in those days?
Yes,
What are the big
I
changes?
think having closely talked and discussed issues with Ugandans when I was in Kenya, they were telling me about the bad economic situation. But when I actually came there 3 days after liberation, because the NRM had asked me to rent an aircraft, to hire an aircraft to go, because half the cabinet hadn't been sworn in and were still left behind in Nairobi. So we all came 3 days after the liberation. And we then were received by President Museveni. And I was that time with his wife.
Can you share with us the feelings on those occasions?
Yeah. Unreal almost, unreal. There were no regular flights, so we come there, the president, we went to State House, and president received us, but he hadn't actually stayed there because there were still some pockets of resistance in town, so he was staying at some other unknown location.
And you came with the cabinet?
Yes, at that time the Prime Minister Kiseka, and the wife from Nairobi. Yes.
So for them, it was also a real feeling.
Yes, that's right. Okay. It was, but then indeed, when you start, it was euphoria everywhere because there were soldiers in the streets, and because they were so happy of this new change. Then, and also that the soldiers under President Museveni had behaved so well during roadblocks. You were no longer robbed of everything that you had. They were treating you very well. People couldn't believe it that an army could actually be disciplined. So that was a fantastic experience. And many soldiers who had actually joined the bush were refugees before. So they all said, "Oh, Madam Blaak, don't you recognize me?" I said, "Okay, well, I'm very happy and good that I didn't know you had joined the bush."
Were you the only white person in the cabinet?
Pardon? Sorry?
Were you the only white person who came with
I was not in the cabinet. I was in the. I was just a friend.
Who came with the group?
Yes, of course. Most people thought I was a journalist. Especially because later on I got married to my late husband, who was Minister of Defense. In the first government of President Museveni. So he had already been sworn in, and later on I got to know him. So of course he was also wondering, what is this white we call Mzungu doing here in...
what did you tell him?
And he was thinking I was a journalist. I said, no, I've known the Ugandans, they're my friends, and
So people were shocked, surprised to see you.
Yes, sure. Because many people, because of the war, embassies had, evacuated their families, so there were only heads of missions left, and there were certainly not many white people left, and certainly not many women, I guess. Yes.
That was 24 years ago, and 25.
Yes.
25 years ago.
Yeah, 25.
What are the qualitative changes you can point out?
Yeah, it's tremendous, because like I said, when Ugandans talked to me when I was in Kenya, saying how the economy was totally destroyed. I couldn't believe it when I came, and I went through the streets, which used to be like an industrial center, an industrial part of town. Everything was, closed. You could just walk into factories. You could see that machines had been looted, and parts had been taken off, which may have been useful. The economy was totally shattered. And I think always it's more difficult to build an economy from a level below zero than it is when you start afresh and from a level. So because you have to get rid of your old machines, often renovations take more time and are more costly as well if you do factories, and start also lobbying for investors to come, and so now, 25 years later, you can't recognize Kampala. I mean, at that time, we used to get a lift here and there from a few vehicles around the streets. You didn't have to look where you were going because there were no vehicles. But now, we have traffic jams, and we have...
So on the economic front, things have improved
tremendously. Yeah, we have almost achieved, in the beginning, until the economic crisis globally, we're almost achieving 10% growth. 10%. Annually. That is remarkable, very remarkable. And even now, because as you may have heard, we have also found oil and gas. So we think with that prospect, our country is going to do well, and we shall achieve certainly maybe even next year already a 10% growth yet again.
The oil, now you mentioned oil.
Yes.
The story of oil in Africa has not been very positive. We talked about Angola, Nigeria. So, Learning from looking back at this experience, what do you think your country will do differently?
Yes. Well, first of all, we are putting laws in place so that the people who owning certain parts of the land are also going to benefit. And we are making changes in these laws which are absolutely necessary. We don't want to be exploited by all the foreign companies, and so that's not an easy process, I must admit. The latest laws have not yet been passed through Parliament. As you know, we have just had our presidential and parliamentary elections on 18th of February, so when the new Parliament has been inaugurated, and hopefully we shall be able to deal with that.
Is that why the oil is not being exploited?
No, the oil is already exploited. In fact, we started exploration. We started looking for oil in 1996.
No, I'm talking about the actual exploitation.
No, we haven't done that yet. We have companies, and we're hopefully getting oil out of the ground maybe in 2012.
Well, you want to have the laws in place before you start?
Of course, and we need to train our own people so that we have our own professionals, our engineers.
Do you think that's what other African countries did wrong? They didn't. They depend on expatriates.
Well, to a large extent, we also have to rely on experts, and we don't have the machinery, the technical knowledge, know-how. You cannot, in a very short period of time, sort of fill that gap and have your own staff available. So definitely, we shall rely on foreigners and foreign companies, and only hope that we shall take Uganda at heart, and our interest, to the people to benefit from it, and not just a few individuals. And we are on the right track, as I know, at the moment. So let's hope that everything will continue its course the way we have planned.
For the sake of Africa, we have to hope for the best.
But we always learn a lot from Ghana, by the way, because whenever we have, like, for instance, the election, how democracy should be formed, we are taking our people, we have taken parliamentarians to see how this goes.
We hope that we are good teachers. Let's now talk about politics of Uganda. And the NR movement is considered as a one-man movement.
That's right. We, especially in the beginning, it was not a
so it's Museveni, it's NRM is Museveni.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about the movement?
Well, it was, you see, as we had talked about the bad historical times in Uganda, the country was very divided, because political parties in the past had been divided on religious lines, tribal lines, and so it was a terrible mess. And I think when President Museveni came into power, one of the first points of the NRM 10-point program was also to not have political parties, but to have a movement like the National Resistance Movement, which was an all-encompassing movement that all Ugandans belong to. Yeah. So it's not a matter of have to become a member of this movement. No, automatically you are there. Oh. And so for 19 years, we had created what is called a no-party state. And that gave Uganda the opportunity to start, uniting and starting to build up our economy. Having peace and security is, of course, the basis for any growth of any economy, of economic progress that any country. Stability, that's what we needed. And that's what President Museveni has managed so well. It has worked extremely well. I mean, we are still a stable country. We've managed even the war in the north, as you may have heard.
I'm going to. I was going to ask you but this politics. You mentioned your last election.
Yes.
It was also fraught with a lot of violence and.
Not at all. I thought I would like to contradict you on that. It were the best elections that have passed.
Yesterday, the opposition leader was shot. He was protesting.
Yeah, but that was not because of the political elections or whatever. Because he lost with 26%. President Museveni gained 68% of the votes. It's true that the opposition parties, we had another 7 candidates, including President Museveni, 8 to seek the presidency. And, what is happening now in Uganda, it's true what you are saying, there were some problems, is that the fuel prices, which are hiked, I mean, even here in the Netherlands, they have never been as high as today when you're going. And of course, in developing countries, the oil prices are linked to whatever you have to pay for a barrel of oil in the world. So in that sense, there's no compensation or dispensation for Uganda or for Africa, when already it's difficult for us to live with the minimum that we have. And oil prices, the fuel, it really enters into all aspects of life.
Yeah.
So whether it is, children going back to school, they have to be transported in buses. It's the food that is being grown everywhere in the country that has to be transported in vehicles. It's the oil itself which comes by road. So it's making life hard, and it's making life difficult, especially for the poor people. So indeed, what they were now trying to do is, I think, to exploit their political differences by saying we want to demonstrate for the hike in fuel prices and food prices. But it's not only in Uganda, it's everywhere.
I don't think they're learning from another part of Africa.
Yeah, but I don't think that situation will arise in Uganda, because we've had a democratic system of elections. Like I said, for 19 years we had a no-party state. Then we put it to a referendum. Do you want multi-parties?
But
yes
do you
or
agree
no?
that it's not a good advertisement when opposition leader is shot?
But that was because he went into a demonstration for which he was not given any permission.
Okay, it's not a good idea.
So it was an illegal gathering, and then the police intervened and they fired rubber bullets. And his finger apparently was hit by a rubber bullet.
Right.
So it's not like some news media had stated that he was shot in the head and anything. That's not true. So I'm sorry to say, but the media are trying to probably gain more headlines or whatever.
Okay, let's hope better news comes.
I think it will be controlled. I don't think there will be any problem.
President Museveni came out strongly that he wasn't going to tolerate North African style demonstration.
No, because I think indeed, like coming back to the demonstrations, if you do demonstrations, like in any country, even in the Netherlands, you need a permission for demonstration. Yeah. Now, if what we can see in Africa, and we've had that in the past as well, if a demonstration, if intended to be peaceful, there are always elements in there. Some Ugandans who are taking advantage become like hooligans. So they start looting from the streets. And as you know, in Kampala, like in many cities in Africa, our shops are on the streets. They're little stores, people who are selling their stuff. And if they are, losing all their, even the newspaper vendors or what, this is causing a lot of misery. And then they start breaking windows. So we said you can have your demonstrations, but not in the center of town. And I think that is very reasonable, because any government has the right to say, yes, you can hold your demonstration peacefully, but in a part of town that we can control.
You represent an African country, yeah? And the media, there was negative. So how do you deal with this type of negativity you get about Uganda or about Africa?
True. That's very sad, actually. We are fighting it continuously. But good news is no news in the media. So when a country does well, you don't often hear it.
You get frustrated?
Sometimes, yes, I do get a little bit frustrated, because it becomes,
how do you deal with your
it's endless. You don't have to, it's trying to talk to as many people as possible, because even if I start writing a piece or reacting to that, it doesn't make the headlines anymore. The bad news has already passed. So I think it is information that people need, but it's balanced information and not just negativity. So it's something that we as Africans, we have to be very conscious of. I think we have to continually fight it. And I think it's somehow here and there, in at least what I see happening in the area of accreditation here, Benelux countries, becoming a bit more balanced, fortunately. But I think there's a job for us as diplomats to engage with the media and brief them and be interactive, ask them questions. When they call me, I do respond, and they like to respond. They don't like us to say, I have to first check back with my government. So they would like you to give an instant response to what has been happening. And if you make yourself available to the media, it helps. It increases the confidence, and I do respond.
Okay. And
radio and all that, yes.
Shall we move to the northern part of your country?
Sure, please do.
The Law Resistance Army.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about them?
Yeah, it has been a headache for not a country, but for everybody. Well, that is the big question that I don't think has been answered by anybody. They had no political program. I think they felt, you see, you have to look back at Uganda's history. Uganda has been run by the leaders they all came from the northern tribes. There was Acholis, and we had President Idi Amin, who was from the tribe Akakwa, also from the north. Then,
it's a north-south problem.
Yes, north-south problem.
Like most
Boti
African
was
countries.
a Lango, actually, also from the northern part. So when Museveni came into power, he was the first one from another part, from the southwestern part of the country. And I think it didn't give much confidence because the people ran away from the north and they thought it's going to be like the same. Now the southwesterners are going to be in charge. We are going to be marginalized. So let us go to the bush. But then coming back to a man like Joseph Kony, who has caused so much harm and inflicted so much damage on especially the children, our children, a whole generation that has been spoiled at the claws of Kony. Kony has no political program.
That is what makes it so difficult to understand, because he's an Acholi, and the violence also localized in this area.
If I ever were to meet him, I would first ask him that question. Why did you inflict so much harm and killings and abductions and kidnappings from your own tribe? It is, to me, totally, I don't understand it.
Because mostly in Africa it's a tribal, intertribal.
Correct.
But this now is within a tribe.
Well, of course, I would like to categorize this particular movement, the Lord Resistance Movement, as a cult. It is headed by a man, as I said, who has no political program, who believes that he had a vision of God and that he has certain supernatural powers.
So it's difficult to deal with...
people were afraid of him.
But there was a lady who was former head of another group there.
Yeah, Alice Lakwena. Yeah, she was preceding the One movement, and she was defeated by the government. This was in 1988.
But the LRA problem has been going on for several years.
20 years.
20 years. It's not possible for the government to sit down meet the people.
We did that. We had numerous attempts to peace talks and negotiations, and they have all failed until we had the ones that were basically chaired by the Vice President of Southern Sudan, Riek Machar, and the government of Uganda. We were extremely serious about this. The peace talks lasted for 2 years. We negotiated in Juba with some leadership, those ones who were representing the LRA. Joseph Kony himself and the leaders, the actual commanders, did not appear in Juba. And when finally a very much, elaborate and difficult peace draft process was ready to be signed, he just didn't turn up for the signature.
So that was the end of that.
That was the end of that. By that time, he had already been moved out of Southern Sudan. You see, the reason why we could never get Kony is even if we were hot on his heels, he would hop over to the border and he would have a safe haven in Southern Sudan.
But now?
And then the situation in Southern Sudan changed. As you know, Uganda had also been pursuing the LRA in the territory of Southern Sudan through a bilateral agreement, and then Kony had to flee to the Congo, to the Democratic Republic of Congo, has even had part of his army in the Central African Republic, back into Sudan. He even was in Darfur, for that matter. So the man is now, even though we have a peaceful Uganda since basically the end of 2005, this man, Joseph Kony, is continued to abduct people, kill people, rape them, use children as sex slaves, and make them to murder others. Now in Congo. So we are still concerned as a government, and we are still working very closely with the army of the Congo to see and the army of Southern Sudan to see whether we could arrest Kony, and then we hope to hand him over to the ICC.
Yeah, I'm good.
Which is
the next question is going to be on the ICC. But before then, let's take this short break.
Yes.
We'll come back.
Good.
Yeah, we'll take this short break, and when we come back, we'll continue with Ambassador Blaak.
On this program, Focus on Africans, hosted by the popular Pan-African writer Femi Akomolafe, who has devoted his entire life to championing African cause, we highlight this problem and try to look for solution. Focus on Africans is a program to watch, to meet with those with passion to build a better African for ourselves and the coming generations. Focus on Africans. Together, we can build a better Africa.
Welcome viewers, the program is focused on Africans, and today our guest is Ambassador Blaak. Yeah, Madam Ambassador, you were telling us about referring the case to the International Criminal Court of Justice. What is the situation now?
Yes, indeed, we referred the case in 2004,
Okay.
January. The reason for us referring the case, it was the very first case that the court had to deal with, is because Joseph Kony and those ones responsible for gross human rights violations and war crimes had always escaped us. We never managed to get him, basically.
Okay.
So it was that we felt that if we refer the case to the International Criminal Court, maybe the other states' parties could assist us
So
in
maybe internationalize the problem.
yeah, that's right, because we had failed to actually arrest Joseph Kony. And as I said, he's now roaming around in other places.
Southern
So
Africa.
it was in July 2005 that the court actually managed to issue the warrants of arrest for 5 of the leaders who were bearing the greatest responsibility for the crimes committed.
Has any one of them been caught?
No, in fact, one of them was actually killed in an ambush fight, and the other one, the second in command, called Vincent Otti, was killed by Joseph Kony himself, and that was during the peace talks or shortly after, because I think Joseph Kony disagreed, and maybe Vincent Otti was more to say, maybe we should talk peace, maybe we should, discuss this with the government, and Joseph Kony wouldn't have it.
So at the moment there's no communication between the LRA and the Ugandan government?
No,
Not at all?
No, not at all. We are actually pursuing him still to arrest him.
Are there no cooperation agreement among the Central African states?
Well, let's say that according to the Rome Statute, which is the basis for the ICC, it is also stipulated that in case of the warrants of arrest, all those countries that have ratified the Rome Statute, in principle, have the obligation to arrest and surrender any of the suspects. So in that sense, we were hoping with international cooperation that maybe we would be able to achieve that goal.
Since that's 6 years ago?
2005, yes, 6 years ago.
So why do you think he has not been arrested?
Well, Africa is large, as you know. I think people forget that often. That when you are in a forest, he's now actually in a national park in the northeastern part of the Congo called Karamba, and that is where we actually launched an attack with the 3 countries. Congo, that was in December 2008, called Operation Lightning Thunder. And we did inflict a lot of damage on the camps that Kony had been running, but
he escaped.
We didn't manage. I think when you hear helicopters coming in a national park from maybe 30 minutes away, obviously, I guess with more adequate equipment, it would have perhaps been possible. But we managed to obtain a lot of communication and radio equipment. So in that sense, it was successful, but we didn't manage to get him. So.
And now the global trend is on democracy and building of democratic institutions. Your president, President Museveni, has been in power for 25 years now.
Correct, yes.
When is he handing over?
Well, he has just, on the 18th of February, been re-elected, and there were 7 other candidates.
Is he not tired?
Well, I think he's a wonderful president with an incredible level of energy. He hardly sleeps. He works and works. I think he sleeps maybe 4 hours a night at most. So he has the drive, he has the energy, he has the vision. And I think when it comes to democracies, we should not always have to have a blueprint on a Western modeled democracy, because I think as Africans we have to determine our own democracy. We have to determine how we want to be ruled. And a blueprint of what the West wants in terms of having these, political parties, like I said before, 19 years we had a no-party state, and Uganda was going fantastically well.
But then
So-
suddenly you moved to multi-party system.
Yes, I
Based on
think
the-
a lot of pressure from Western
Yeah, that's what
states,
I'm asking
because
you.
they say if you don't allow this opening of space to political parties, we shall withdraw aid, and there are all sorts of penalties attached to that.
It's not something that
We
you-
put it to the people of Uganda, and then eventually they said, because first when Museveni came, we had to change the constitution of Uganda. It had been outdated, it was archaic. We had to come up with new principles. So the new constitution was only promulgated in 1995.
Okay.
Yes, and so then we had the first elections thereafter, and every 5 years we have presidential elections. And I think when you say a person has overstayed in power or what, let it be the people of that country that decide. If democracy is there, like we have in Uganda, a proper democracy, there were observers there. Of course, there are in any elections always irregularities. Look at what happened in the United States. There were also irregularities sometimes. So you cannot say that we're doing it perfectly, but I think people's rights and people's rights to democratically elect someone is up to them.
Okay.
And, you know, there's of course opposition, there is a lot, but let the people of Uganda decide themselves.
The trend, as I mentioned, is towards periodic elections.
Yeah.
So when you meet Western leaders, how do you, what justification do you put across to them that, we need to build our own blueprints?
No, I think, you see, when you have a democracy, and I believe in Uganda we have the basic principles of a democracy.
Yeah.
We,
Which is?
well, it is like one person, one vote, and be able to give that vote in a secure and peaceful environment. There's no intimidation. There is no, so that it's free and fair, and that is actually being concluded. The elections we had were free and fair. That doesn't mean there were no irregularities, but the irregularities were not of such nature that it would have changed the outcome of the elections, and I think that is very important. So if the people chose, and they have indicated by their expressing and giving their votes that they want President Museveni because he had given them stability, peace and security and economic progress, and they have confidence in him for the next 5 years, then let the people of Uganda decide. Let not other Western states say it's not correct.
But you don't think that it's necessary to have term limits?
No, we had, no, I don't think it's necessary. Like, in the government in the United Kingdom, there are no term limits. There are many governments around the world where there are no term limits. So it's true to say that I think the longest reigning person in the United Kingdom was Margaret Thatcher for 12 years. But if a democracy is to the people,
but
and
the problem
people need to
of
choose.
Africa is you have good leaders, but they didn't build institutions that outlast them.
Yes.
So as soon as they're taken off the stage, the thing collapse.
Okay.
In the West, you have institutions. Belgium hasn't had the government for 300 years. So, but in the case of Africa, the institutions are not there. So it depends on personality.
Yeah, often. But when you see that a person is ruling the country properly, why not continue?
We are mortals, so anything can happen. But if what institutions are President Museveni building that will outlast him?
I think what will outlast him is that we have built unity in the country. We have peace and security.
Based on its personality?
We have, of course, a democracy. We have democratic rule. And all these institutions, you can't wipe them off in one night unless the country, would go into a war situation. And so I think let the people of these countries themselves determine, like what is happening in Northern Africa is, the people feel that they haven't been able to express their democratic rights, so it is up to them. And so you see there are changes being made now in order to give more democratic rights to the people. But I don't think it will come to that in Uganda because people are not unhappy, otherwise President Museveni would not have won with 68% of the votes.
Okay.
So if he's doing well and he's not tired, he is still as charismatic as he was ever before. He is an incredible intellectual person with a great vision that I think is very, very good for Uganda.
What are some of his visions?
But it's for the people, I think, is to have an economic development whereby poverty is reduced. poverty reduction is very high on our
On the
agenda.
agenda, yeah.
But what we need to go is from working and plowing our fields with a hoe and a spade is to go into a more mechanized agricultural world.
Based on indigenous
Which
technology?
is modernization of our agriculture, because 80% of our output as an economy is in the agricultural field.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we need to modernize. Another very important aspect is it's very unfair to send our raw materials abroad and export them. It's our coffee beans, you dry them, put them in a bag, and hoops, up they go at a minimum price. Because we are depending on what's happening in the world level. What we need is to add value to our produce locally in the country itself. So that's what we are doing.
We read a lot about these fine ideas. How are you implementing them?
Well, for us, I think we are realistic enough to know that some of these modernizations or factories and others, we don't have that technical knowledge, know-how. Sometimes we don't have the capital to invest because these machines are extremely expensive. For that, we need investors. And I think the country has been doing extremely well in foreign direct investments. We have no limitations in terms of exporting any money that is generated or money earned to take it to wherever the owners
that's
wanted
the next
to go.
question I was going to ask you.
Sorry.
For potential investors, what are the attractions of Uganda?
But the attractions of Uganda, I think Uganda is blessed. It's with fertility that is not matched in any other country, not even your beautiful Ghana, which we take often as an example in many ways of development. I think we have rivers, like any tourist who comes to the country, they are impressed with the greenery. They didn't know Africa. They think, you need air conditioning, you need whatever. We don't need air conditioning. We have a temperature about 25 degrees throughout. We have a fertility that if you put a coffee bean in, it will grow, even if you don't tend to it for the, We have 3 harvests a year, where in many countries you can only be happy to have 1.
3 harvests in it?
Yes. For,
On all the crops?
No, well, I mean,
most of the crops.
but most of the crops, it is a potential that is unmatched. So, since we are blessed with such fertility, I think the economic stability that President Museveni has given us with, the workforce of the people, it is an ideal environment for investors to come, because we have created a very conducive investment climate whereby we can give confidence to the people who are coming. We have set up commercial courts, so if there's a dispute, they can at least address that problem and have it adjudicated.
Another problem for Africa is the investors are coming only to the extractive areas of commercial buying of raw materials. Are they setting up shops in Uganda to process some of these things?
Oh yes, they are, fortunately. Of course, I think when investors come, they will not come unless they can earn money. Let's face it. It has to be a commercially feasible venture that is actually creating, hard cash for anybody.
I'm talking about the industrial production.
Yes, we are setting it up. We had a big problem with our power, but we are now building, more capacity. We are having the Bujagali dam, which is going to be completed fairly soon, which gives us 600 megawatts. We are doing another dam in Karuma.
Okay.
I think also a similar megawatt capacity, because what we need is indeed, if we are going to industrialize Uganda, like all the raw products, all the materials that we can produce, we need to add value through industrialization. And for that we need investors, and they can come. Even if we give them certain privileges, we don't mind, because when investors do come, they give jobs to the people. And what do we need? We need people who get jobs. So even if sometimes we don't tax investors very harshly, and we give them some tax holidays, then that means we don't mind, because the taxes are being generated because of the people who can buy products, industrialized products, because they have an income. So in some other way, these taxes are coming back to the government in any case.
Uganda is a very small country. And investors need a larger market. What is the position of your country within the East African?
Well, of course, we have. We first had 3 countries in the East African community. That was Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda. That has recently been expanded with Rwanda and Burundi. So we have a market there of, I think, is over 120 million people now. and we are concentrating
Now you're
on that.
competing with the 5 countries. So
Yeah, no, we are not competing in many ways. Of course, we still have to sort of protect our fledgling industries here and there, so that we are not flooded.
No, I meant for investors.
Ah.
There are 5 countries now who have to choose among you.
True.
Among the 5 countries.
But it doesn't really matter whether an industry is set up anywhere. Of course, we would like it to be Uganda, but as long as the produce, we are creating a market whereby they don't have to look at export outside the East African community, but they have already got a secure market from the 5 countries of the East African community. So that we are just regulating that now, become with our customs to have no taxation, so that goods can travel freely.
How far down the road are you now? Are you a complete market, the East African?
We are a complete market as far as the customs tariffs are concerned. We have an East African Parliament, we have an East African court, we have, and we are establishing all other mechanisms. You see, when we had actually already an East African Union in the past, which was of course destroyed by Idi Amin and the like, so it completely collapsed. But that was a far more integrated system than even now the European Union is. There was one passport, one currency, one airline, one bank, one railway. I mean, it was fantastic.
You still aim to.
That is what I'm sure that is what we are aiming. It's only that when the 3 countries fell apart, you see that each of the countries, for us, Uganda, we fell into political turmoil, and others have managed to develop much in a different way. Kenya is still the most developed out of all the 5 countries.
So you have a lot of catch up to do.
We have a lot of catch up to do, and we shall get there. And of course, now once our system is broken down, you have to painstakingly build it up again, and it's not easy. It's not easy. Our currencies have, also different values and etc. So, but we are getting there. I'm very confident that that's the way to go, because to be relying on all our exports to, for instance, the EU, they're imposing more and more regulations, phytosanitary, there is always the packaging, there is this, there is that, and it's becoming more expensive to actually export. So I think we have to be becoming more reliant. And I give you one example, for instance. It took us a long time before the EU. We had actually certified to export our Ugandan honey to the EU market. And then what happened? I was contacting some producers. I said, "Come now to Europe, to come to Uganda, to the Netherlands and Belgium. We will organize a trip for you, and you can sell the honey." And she said, "No, I can't come because I need to have glass pots, because these are regulations by the EU. I would have to have a huge financial loan and burden in order to import these pots or to produce them locally." And she said, now when I spoke to her recently as a lady, she said, "Well, Mirjam, why should I go through all these hassles of exporting to the market when there is a ready market available here?" And she is now exporting bulk, which means in jerrycans, to the DRC, to Southern Sudan, to many other countries. So she said, without the hassle of having all that. So you see, what you see now is our market is growing, the demands is growing, and there's no such.
How about the disposable income? Do people have enough money to? Can they earn enough money than when?
Well, of course, I think for us, our poverty levels have decreased. I think it's 29-something% as to over 50. I think it was 57% when we entered into power in 1986. So that is, people living below the poverty line. And I think that is a big achievement of the NRM government. So that means the people with disposable incomes have actually increased, and that doesn't mean that we don't have poverty. I must admit, we are doing everything to eradicate it, especially in the rural areas. That's why we want to help the farmers to give a better produce, to add value to whatever they produce. And that is, I think, a biggest challenge we have now, is to maximize the potential that Uganda has.
How about the technological infrastructure like ICT?
Oh, yes.
How is Uganda addressing that?
Yeah, I think ICT is not a problem at all. We have even established a special ministry.
Fine.
I think Ugandans, no matter where, whether it's a house girl or a shamba boy, you know, the ones working in the gardens,
Yeah.
they have a telephone, a mobile phone.
Okay.
And, you know, as you employing them, you can call them. They may not be able to call you because they may not have credit, but they have a phone. It become like almost a state
Your
symbol.
neighbor, Rwanda, has invested a lot in...
We have about 5 telephone service providers, so that is not a problem. We are doing very well on the internet and email connections. I think what we more have a problem, I think we are doing very well on the ICT. There's always a need for it to improve, no doubt, and make it cheaper so that people have more access to it. But it has changed our lives to have mobile phones. Previously, you had to find out whether a crop was ready in maybe the northern part. Yes, and then to organize your transport now, it's a matter of phoning, and you know, things are instantly done. So it's the way to go. What we need in Uganda is more on infrastructure such as road and railways. I think we are really concentrating on that.
You are incredibly optimistic about the future of Uganda.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
With my whole heart.
What gives rise to your optimism?
What gives? I think we have created the right environment, and it's the right enthusiasm. People who want to make it in this world. But I see that for Africa in general, because often when we speak in international fora, or we go to New York and the UN and all that, we speak for Africa as a whole. Okay. And I think Africa is endowed with so much potential that we haven't exploited. In the past, we've always been exploited by, colonialist powers, and now it's other, multinational firms and what. And I think what we have to do is to guard ourselves, but also create at least a minimum level of standard of living which is acceptable for our people, so that they have a chance, to buy produce from our own within Africa. We don't have to, so that's what we have to achieve. We don't have to go outside. But we have to become more self-confident, and,
that's a very good
you see that happening, you see it happening. I think people say we shouldn't be, even in international fora. We speak for Africa. We don't let ourselves all the time be ruled by others who say what we have to do. We have our own views, we have our own leaders, we have our own academics, and we have the children who are going to school, learning a job.
Life is good.
It's fantastic.
Okay. This is a program where we try to analyze the problems and also look for some ideas on the problems of Africa. What your view are we doing wrong? We have everything: the fertile land resources, the human potential. What are some of the things you think we can start doing to make things better for our people?
Well, I think governance, good governance was, I think, one of, at least as far as Uganda is concerned, but I believe also in many African countries, it has been a big problem. If you can't create a conducive environment such as peace and stability, you're going to be in turmoil forever, and it's going to make the people poorer. So I think to have good leaders, and under whatever democratic system we ourselves as Africans choose to be ruled, that is what should make us tick, and that is what should make us
Do you think that we should pay less attention to outside people telling us what to do?
Yes, of course. I said we don't perhaps need a lot of outside interference. Of course, we still need, for instance, in Uganda, we have lived a lot through donors. Our budget was, for a large part supported by donors. And I always, we say, our new slogan, our new lines are basically trade instead of aid. But what we are still realistic enough that we still need aid in order to build the infrastructure. But what we receive on aid should be for the benefit of our economic growth. So that means instead very basic systems such as infrastructural projects. But once we get there, then we should learn to stand on our own feet. And I think we shall get there. For Uganda, a few more years.
And for Africa.
And for Africa, no doubt.
Yeah, on this very positive note, I say, thank you very much, Madam Ambassador.
Yes, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure. And good luck with the program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Yes, viewers, the program is focused on Africans, and we've shared very interesting ideas with Ambassador Blaak. And let's hope Africa also will start listening to our voice, as Madam Ambassador just informed us. And the program is focused on Africa. Until next week, I say, Ireo.